AITA for exposing my gold digger ex after she dumped me publicly? My name is Caleb. I am 29 years old, and until recently, I was in a relationship with my ex-girlfriend Brianna for almost 4 years. When we started dating, the first thing that caught my attention about her was her personality. Brianna was very outgoing, spoke with confidence, and always seemed to have a strong presence. At that time, I thought that was a good thing. I, on the other hand, have always been a quieter and more reserved person, so her energy seemed interesting and different to me. I liked that she spoke her mind without beating around the bush. At first, I saw it as a sign of honesty. However, as time passed, I began to realize that there was a big difference between being direct and enjoying making a scene in front of other people. Brianna had a habit that at first seemed like just a harmless joke, but little by little it stopped being funny and started getting uncomfortable. She liked to argue in public, and I do not mean those little couple arguments that sometimes happen naturally. Her thing was different. She seemed to deliberately seek out an audience. For example, when we went out to dinner and she did not like something, she did not wait until we were alone to bring it up. Instead, she would say it out loud in front of all the waiters, other customers, or even our friends. Sometimes it was over small things, like me having chosen a restaurant she did not like. But she managed to turn something insignificant into a little spectacle. Caleb always picks the most mediocre places, she would say out loud while looking around as if she needed someone else to hear. I really don't know how he still hasn't learned. The first few times, I reacted with a nervous laugh. I thought it was simply part of her humor, but it did not take me long to realize she was not joking. Her intention was for others to hear it. On one occasion, I told her that those kinds of situations made me feel uncomfortable. Her response was exactly the same as always. "And why are you embarrassed?" she said, shrugging her shoulders. "If it bothers you, then change." Her logic was quite strange. According to her, pointing out my supposed flaws in public was a way to motivate me to improve. Over time, that behavior started to repeat itself more and more. If I forgot to buy something at the grocery store, if I arrived 5 minutes late, or if she simply did not agree with one of my ideas, anything could end up in a scene in front of other people. I especially remember a get-together with some of her friends at a local brewery. We were casually talking about travel when someone mentioned they were planning a trip to Italy. At that moment, Brianna burst out laughing and said something I still remember quite clearly. "Caleb could never afford a trip like that," she commented. "He is more the staycation on the couch type." The people around us laughed uncomfortably. I smiled too, but inside I felt that strange sensation that appears when you know someone has just crossed a line. Later, when we were alone, I told her that comment had bothered me, but her response was the same as always. "Relax," she said. "If it bothers you that much, then work harder and make more money." Those kinds of phrases started to appear more frequently. Sometimes it seemed she needed to constantly prove that she was somehow above me. The funny thing is that outside of those moments, our relationship seemed completely normal. We could spend several quiet evenings at our apartment, watching shows on Netflix, cooking together, or simply taking a walk through the park. Those moments were pleasant and made me think that maybe I was exaggerating things. Besides, there was the fact that we had been together for quite some time. For years is no small thing. When a person invests that much time in a relationship, it is easy to convince yourself that the problems are not as serious as they seem. Still, there was something that constantly repeated itself. Brianna loved being the center of attention, and often the easiest way to achieve it was by creating drama. At some gatherings, she even seemed to wait for the perfect moment to start an argument. Once, one of my friends told me something that, at the time, I preferred not to take too seriously. "Your girlfriend has a special talent for turning any chill hangout into an episode of a reality show." He said it half-jokingly, but deep down, there was some truth to his words. Despite everything, I kept trying to make the relationship work. Everything changed a few months ago when I lost my job. I had been working for 3 years at a supply chain management company. It was not my dream job, but it was stable and allowed us to live comfortably. Unfortunately, the company started having financial problems, and in the end, they made the decision to downsize. I was one of the people they laid off. It was not personal. That same day, they let go of several employees. Even so, receiving news like that is never easy. When I got home and told Brianna, her reaction was not exactly what I expected. She was not angry, but she did not seem particularly worried about how I felt either. The first thing she asked me was quite direct. "And how much is your severance package?" I explained that I had a small financial cushion and that I would start looking for a new job right away. She simply nodded. "Well, I hope it doesn't take you long," she said. During the first few weeks, I dedicated myself entirely to job hunting. I updated my LinkedIn profile, sent out resumes every day, checked job boards, and attended interviews when opportunities arose. It was an exhausting process, but also pretty normal for anyone looking for work. However, Brianna started showing impatience very quickly. Barely a few days had passed when the sarcastic comments began. "Did you find anything today? Or are we still in the professional reflection stage?" I tried not to give it too much importance. I thought maybe she was stressed and simply did not know how to express it better. But the jokes started to repeat themselves more and more. One afternoon, while I was scrolling through job listings on my laptop, she walked behind me and commented, "It's funny. I always thought you were more ambitious." I did not answer. At that moment, I was focused on sending applications. 2 weeks after losing my job, the situation started to get worse. Not because I had stopped looking for employment. In fact, I was sending out more applications than ever. But finding a job takes time, and anyone who has gone through something similar knows that 2 weeks is nothing. For Brianna, on the other hand, it seemed like an eternity. One night, while we were having dinner, she mentioned it with that tone I already knew all too well. 2 weeks and nothing impressive. What bothered me the most were not her words, but the way she said them. It did not sound like concern. It sounded like pure sarcasm. "I am looking every day," I answered her calmly. "These things take time." She simply rolled her eyes. "Sure, it must be very hard to send emails." I decided not to answer. I did not feel like starting yet another argument. A couple of days later, one of our friends organized a small get-together at his house. Nothing special, just a few people to talk and hang out. I thought it was a good idea to go out a bit and clear my mind. I had been cooped up in our apartment for several days, sending job applications, and needed a change of scenery. When we arrived at the home of the friend who had organized the gathering, there were already about 8 or 9 people there. Some were mutual friends, and others were acquaintances of Brianna's whom I had barely seen a couple of times. At first, the atmosphere was completely normal. There were relaxed conversations, soft music playing in the background, and several people laughing as they chatted in the living room. During the first hour, everything went quite smoothly. Brianna was in a very good mood. She walked around the room talking to everyone, telling anecdotes, and dropping witty comments that made the group laugh. That was the version of her that most people knew. Charismatic, self-confident, and very funny. But after a while, the conversation changed topics. Someone started talking about work. One of our friends commented that his tech company was growing quite a bit, and they were hiring more staff. From there, several people began to share how their jobs were going, the projects they were involved in, and some plans they had for the upcoming year. Then, someone asked me a simple question. "Caleb, how are things going for you at work?" I did not even have time to answer. Before I could open my mouth, Brianna let out a little laugh. It was not a kind or casual laugh. It was that short laugh someone gives right before saying something uncomfortable. "Oh, Caleb is exploring new opportunities," she said, drawing out the words in an exaggerated way. Some people smiled, thinking it was a joke. I tried to answer naturally. "I am looking for something new. I was laid off a couple of weeks ago, but I'm already doing interviews." Brianna laughed again. This time her laugh was louder. "Interviews," she repeated with a clearly sarcastic tone. That's a very elegant way of saying he is unemployed. For a moment, the room fell silent. Someone tried to change the subject, but Brianna was not finished yet. She leaned back in her chair, crossed her arms, and looked at me with a smile I knew all too well. It was exactly the same smile that appeared right before one of her public scenes began. "Though I guess it makes sense," she continued. She paused briefly, as if she wanted to make sure everyone was paying attention. "Caleb has always had a special talent for mediocrity." Several people looked at each other. Others looked down at their drinks to avoid the awkward moment. I felt that familiar mix of discomfort and frustration, but this time there was something different. Maybe it was the accumulated exhaustion of the last few weeks, or simply that I no longer had the patience to put up with that kind of thing. Still, I tried to stay calm. "Brianna," I said quietly, "there is no need to do this here." She raised her eyebrows with an exaggeratedly surprised expression. "What?" she replied. "I'm just telling the truth." Then she looked around the group, clearly seeking everyone's attention. In fact, she added with a sarcasm-laden smile, I think this is a good time to be completely honest. She took a short, dramatic pause. It was obvious she wanted everyone to hear what she was about to say. Then, in front of all our friends, she said something that completely changed the mood in the room. I have been seriously thinking about breaking up with Caleb. Several people froze completely, but Brianna did not stop there. She leaned her elbows on the table, looked me straight in the eyes, and continued talking with a calmness that seemed almost rehearsed. Let's be honest, she said. I don't want to spend my life with someone average, and definitely not with someone without money either. The room fell into absolute silence, and just when it seemed like she had already said enough, she decided to finish it off with one last sentence that, in her mind, would probably be the final blow. So yes, she added, looking at the others. I will probably leave him soon for someone who actually has money. Her words hung in the air as if someone had turned off all the sound in the room. Some of our friends avoided looking at me. Others looked at Brianna with a mix of surprise and obvious discomfort. It was not the first time she had caused a scene in public, but this time she had crossed a line that not even she had crossed before. And in that moment, something inside me simply snapped. For years I had endured her comments, her sarcasm-filled jokes, and those little humiliations disguised as honesty. I had always tried to keep my cool. I never wanted to respond with the same aggressiveness. But that night was different. For the first time, I did not feel like staying quiet, and to my own surprise, the first thing I did was laugh. It was not a nervous laugh like other times. It was a real laugh. Brianna frowned immediately. What are you laughing at? She asked. I leaned back in my chair and looked right at her. Fine, I said with absolute calm. Then leave. The room fell silent again. Brianna blinked a couple of times as if she had not expected that response. Then she smiled, but it was not a kind smile. It was an arrogant smile. You wouldn't last a single day without me, she said. So stop acting brave. At that moment, I felt something strange, a sort of tranquility I had not felt in a long time. Maybe because for the first time in years, I was not afraid of what might happen next. Brave, I replied. No, Brianna, what I am doing is something I should have done a long time ago. She leaned slightly forward. Oh really? She said with a mocking laugh. And what exactly is that? I looked her straight in the eyes, realizing that being with you is a waste of time. Some people at the table let out quiet murmurs. Brianna stopped smiling for a moment. Be careful what you say, she warned in a much colder tone. I shook my head. No, Brianna. In fact, I think today is the perfect day to say it all. She let out a short laugh. Seriously, she said. Now the unemployed guy is going to give a speech. I felt a small spark of anger, but at the same time, there was something stronger growing inside me. A feeling of liberation. Do you know what your real problem is? I said. Enlighten me, she replied sarcastically. That you think you are much more important than you actually are. Sure, she answered. And you are a great example of success. I did not answer that. But at least I am not a pathetic person who needs to humiliate their partner in public to feel superior. Her expression hardened immediately. Pathetic, she repeated. Yes, I said, pathetic. The table was completely silent. Everyone was watching. Brianna crossed her arms. Look who's talking, she said. The man who can't even keep a job. At that moment, I took my phone out of my pocket. Funny you should mention that, I replied. She raised an eyebrow. Now you're going to show us memes to defend yourself. I ignored the comment. I opened the email I had received just an hour earlier. In fact, I had seen it while we were at the gathering, but had decided to review it later. Now seemed like the perfect time. I turned the phone toward her. Read this. Brianna looked at the screen with obvious annoyance. What is that? My new job, I said. Brianna frowned and reluctantly took the phone. For a few seconds, she stared at the screen while reading the message. I could see her expression changing little by little. First, she looked confused. Then, her face showed something close to disbelief. What is this? She finally asked. It's a job offer, I answered calmly. I was just accepted at a production company. A production company for what? She asked. Film. Upon hearing that, several people at the table looked up with interest. I studied film, I continued. Something you curiously forgot to mention while you were putting on your little show. Brianna looked at the screen again. Camera operator, she muttered. Exactly, I said. And the salary is almost double what I was making before. Her expression changed again. This time she looked uncomfortable. That doesn't mean anything, she replied. I let out a little laugh. It doesn't mean anything. It could be fake, she added. Sure, I said with irony. Because everyone forges hiring documents just to ruin your dramatic moment. Some people at the table started murmuring among themselves. Brianna placed the phone on the table with a small thud. Even so, she said, that doesn't change what I said. I stared at her. No, Brianna, what changes is that now your whole speech looks even more ridiculous. She clenched her jaw. Ridiculous. Yes. I leaned slightly forward. You just put on a whole show saying you were going to leave me for someone with money on the exact same day I get a job where I will be making almost double. Someone at the table let out a small, nervous laugh. Brianna immediately turned toward that person. What's so funny? Then she looked back at me. That doesn't change who you are. You're right, I replied. It doesn't change who I am. I took a short pause before continuing. But it makes it very clear who you are. She narrowed her eyes. And who am I, according to you? I looked at her with a calmness not even I expected to have. A superficial, arrogant, and quite frankly, miserable person. You are unbelievable, she spat. The funny thing, I continued, is that you have spent years behaving as if you were a prize. Brianna let out a bitter laugh. Oh yeah, really? Well, listen to this, Caleb. She smiled coldly. I can find someone better than you in a week. Do it, I replied. I looked right at her. In fact, I encourage you to do it. She opened her mouth to reply, but I interrupted her before she could speak. But before you keep saying things, let's make something clear. The table went silent again. You are not a prize. Brianna looked at me with fury. You are an unbearable woman who thinks money defines a person's worth. And you are a nobody, she replied immediately. I shrugged. Maybe, but at least I am not a person so empty that I need to humiliate others to feel important. The tension at the table was obvious. Besides, I continued, you talk as if you were the most desired woman in the world, as if finding someone better were the easiest thing on the planet. I took a brief pause. But the truth is, I don't think it will be that simple for you. Her face started to turn red. Your friend Ashley would probably have a much easier time, I added. Every time she shows up, she completely outshines you. Some people shifted uncomfortably in their chairs. You, on the other hand, well, let's just say you are not exactly in your prime anymore. Brianna was furious. You are a jerk, and you are incredibly arrogant. No one interrupted us. No one said a thing. Everyone was watching. Do you know what the most ironic part of all this is? I continued. Brianna did not answer. That you have spent years trying to make me feel small. I paused. But tonight you achieved the exact opposite. She clenched her fists. Oh yeah? I leaned back in the chair. Yes, because for the first time in a long time, I realized something very simple. Brianna was looking at me with a mix of rage and confusion. What? I looked straight into her eyes. That losing you wouldn't be a loss. The table was completely silent again. In fact, I added, it would be a huge improvement in my life. Brianna was breathing heavily. You are a truly ungrateful person. No, I answered calmly. I am just someone who finally got tired of all this. No one spoke. No one moved. The tension in the room was so thick it felt like the air had grown heavier. Brianna watched me for several seconds, and then something unexpected happened. Her expression changed. The arrogant confidence she had shown at the beginning of the night was no longer there with the same strength. Her gaze was still hard, but it seemed the situation was no longer under her control. After a few seconds, she took a deep breath. This is not over, she said. No one responded. She looked right at me. Are you with me or not? Several people frowned upon hearing that, but Brianna kept talking as if what she was saying was completely normal. You are going to have to earn my forgiveness. For a moment I thought I had misheard. Your forgiveness? I asked. Brianna nodded in all seriousness. Yes, because you just humiliated me in front of everyone. The statement was so absurd that I could not help but laugh again. It was not a kind laugh. It was a short, incredulous laugh. No, I finally answered. This is over. Brianna narrowed her eyes. Don't talk nonsense. I shook my head. The truth is, I should have ended this a long time ago. Several people looked down upon hearing that. I stood up from my chair. But oh well, I said as I grabbed my jacket. Congratulations. Brianna frowned. For what? I looked at her one last time. Because you got your spectacle. After saying that, I turned around and walked toward the door. I had no intention of continuing to argue. I had spent too much time tolerating those kinds of scenes, and for the first time in years, I felt absolute clarity. I did not want to stay in that relationship, but as soon as I reached the door, I heard footsteps behind me. Caleb. It was Brianna. I ignored her and kept walking out to the driveway. Caleb, wait. I left the house and headed straight for my car. When I opened the door, she finally caught up to me. This isn't over, she said. I turned to look at her. Yes, it is over. No, she insisted. It was just a fight. It wasn't a fight. Of course it was. I shook my head. No, Brianna, it was the end. She crossed her arms. You're exaggerating. No. I paused. Couples argue, but normal couples don't announce in front of 10 people that they are going to leave their partner for someone with more money. She stayed silent for a moment. I was just angry. You were just being yourself, I said. Her expression hardened again. We can fix this. I opened the car door. I don't want to fix it. Caleb. I sat in the driver's seat. She took another step toward the car door. It was just an argument, she said. Tomorrow we'll talk calmly, and that's it. I looked at her one last time before answering. There won't be a tomorrow for this. She frowned. Don't be ridiculous. Goodbye, Brianna. I shut the car door and started the engine. As I pulled out of the driveway, I saw her in the rearview mirror. She was standing under the yellow light of a porch light, watching me drive away. She did not try to stop me again. At that moment, I thought everything had ended right there, but I was wrong. Over the following days, messages started coming in. At first, they were long texts trying to downplay what had happened. It was just an argument. All couples argue. You don't have to exaggerate so much. Then the tone changed. You are being immature. After everything I did for you, you could at least talk to me. I did not answer any of them. I had no interest in continuing to feed the situation or getting into that cycle again. 2 days later, something different happened. Brianna started posting things on social media. Sad memes, dramatic quotes about betrayal, and vague posts along the lines of, some people don't value those who were always there for them. Other times she wrote things like, I wish you knew how much it hurts to lose someone. At first I ignored it, but some friends started sending me screenshots. She also uploaded a lot of Instagram stories. In some, she appeared listening to sad music. In others, staring out the window or writing long and quite dramatic blocks of text. I continued not to answer. A week later, she finally called me. I was at home reviewing some documents related to my new job when her name appeared on my phone screen. I let it go to voicemail. She called again, and then again. On the fourth call, I decided to answer. What do you want? For a few seconds, there was no answer. Then I heard her voice. Babe. I sighed. Don't call me that. There was a pause. I'm sorry, she finally said. What do you want? I repeated. I heard her take a deep breath. I'm sorry for what happened. I did not respond. I can't be without you, she continued. I have been thinking a lot these past few days. I remained silent. Really, I made a mistake. Uh-huh. It was stupid. Yes. There was another moment of silence. Then she said something that made it quite clear that she had not really changed. But you also overreacted. I almost laughed. Sure. Her voice became more tense. If we don't get back together, you're going to regret it. I don't think so. I'm serious. So am I. A few seconds passed without either of us saying anything. Then she said something that, honestly, did not surprise me too much. It was a desperate attempt to regain control. If we don't get back together, I'm going to do something to myself. Silence. I had heard about these kinds of situations before. Friends of mine had gone through similar things in their past relationships. I knew exactly what it was, a serious form of manipulation, a way of using fear to get what she wanted. I took a calm breath before answering, choosing my words carefully. That's a terrible thing to say to try and manipulate someone, Brianna. She did not say anything. I'm not playing this game. We are done. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Then I hung up. I blocked her number immediately after. She never brought that topic up again. Several months have passed since then, and nothing tragic happened. There were no real dramas. Brianna is still around. Sometimes I see her in town. It is not a huge city, so sooner or later you end up bumping into people you know. I have seen her a couple of times in coffee shops or at Target. Once, she even walked right past me in an aisle. She looked at me. I simply ignored her and went on with my shopping. I do not feel hate, nor nostalgia. Rather, I feel something I had not experienced in a long time during that relationship. Peace of mind. Sometimes I think about how ironic it all was. She wanted to put on a spectacle to humiliate me in front of everyone, but all she achieved was showing exactly who she was and finally giving me the reason I needed to walk away. Comment. I want to take a moment to reflect on the deeper message here with all of you. We often spend so much time trying to fix things for people who do not value our presence. Walking away from a negative environment is not a sign of failure, but rather a powerful act of self-respect. Setting firm boundaries allows us to protect our peace of mind. You deserve to be surrounded by people who lift you up instead of tearing you down for an audience. True strength comes from knowing your own worth and refusing to let anyone else define it. Healing begins the moment we decide to take responsibility for our own happiness. Kindness should never be mistaken for weakness. I hope this serves as a gentle reminder to always choose environments where you are truly respected. Thank you for being part of this community and for always supporting positive growth. If you liked it, don't forget to leave a comment and support the channel by subscribing. See you in the upcoming stories.